Hello everyone, I'm Archdeacon Bill Gray, and I'm the priest at the Anglican parish of Bobcaygeon, Dunsford, and Burnt River. I'm delivering my sermon from home for Sunday, March 29th, Lent 5, where in the 11th chapter of the Gospel of John, we hear the story of the raising of Lazarus. This story takes place in a town village known as Bethany, which Jesus often frequented. The root word of Bethany, Beth, a Hebrew word that means house. And house has taken on a whole new significance and meaning for us in these days of self-isolation and of social distancing and staying at home, where we're discovering a new way of being with all of its challenges and opportunities to live differently. For most of us, staying home, house has a whole new significance. In the Bible, there are many places mentioned with the word Beth, meaning house, describing different locations, towns, and villages where there are stories of faith. We will remember the story of the birth of Jesus that took place in Bethlehem. And Bethlehem literally means the house of bread, where Jesus was first fed and nurtured. Another house that frequents itself in the stories of faith and the life of Jesus is a town by the name of Bethsaida. Bethsaida was near where Jesus lived in his early adult ministry along the shores of the Sea of Galilee. Bethsaida literally means the house of the hunt or the house of fish. And of course, there are many stories about Jesus and the use of fish, the feeding of the 5,000, the loaves and fishes that are multiplied, his disciples fishing on the Sea of Galilee, where Jesus is both fed and where he helps to feed others metaphorically and spiritually with fish. Bethphage is another town that is featured in the Gospels near the Mount of Olives, and understandably means the house of unripe figs. And to return to Bethany, Bethany is located near the Mount of Olives. It is adjacent or above the Garden of Gethsemane, and it's across from the great valley that overlooks the walled city of Jerusalem, where you have a clear view of the Temple Mount, where the temple used to be. Bethany means the house of the afflicted. So Bethany is probably a town where the sick and the poor were cared for. Bethany also happens to be the home that features the dear friends of Jesus, Mary, her sister Martha, and their brother Lazarus. People who were nurtured by and gave nurture to Jesus. Bethany is that place where the disciples fetch a donkey for Jesus to ride on in his triumphant entry into Jerusalem on what we traditionally call Palm Sunday. Bethany, as we have noted, is the place where Jesus raises Lazarus from the tomb, and thereby it becomes the place where he spends his final days and finishes his ministry, spending time among the sick, the poor, and the afflicted before his own passion and death. Bethany is also the place where by these loved ones he was anointed by oil, which became, as Jesus declared, a symbol of his coming burial. A tradition where those that were entombed were often anointed by oil. thus preparing him for his own passion and crucifixion. So we see in summary that at his birth, Jesus was fed in the house of bread, Bethlehem. He started his young adult ministry in the Galilees in the house of fish. And he finished his ministry in the house of the afflicted, Bethany. For us, we are living through our own time of Bethany. Our house of affliction is caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, where we grieve the loss of traditional forms of community, security, and comfort. We grieve the loss of people we know who are dealing with impaired health, and we pray and think of strangers alike. Our local nursing home in Bobcaygeon, among the staff and the residents, have experienced the affliction of the COVID-19 virus. 16 have tested positive, 4 more are waiting for results, and 3 have died. And because of staff being off who are sick, there are chronic shortages of adequate care and a need for additional staff. In John's Gospel, chapter 11, we hear the story, as I've mentioned, of Jesus raising his friend Lazarus from the dead. And he did this in the face of distraught and grieving sisters and friends, Mary and Martha, who wondered aloud, Jesus, if you had been here, our brother might not have died. We too long for Jesus in the midst of our grief and loss, to raise our hopes from despair. We are living through a time where we are not gathering publicly in our churches and worship spaces. We are observing social distancing and self-isolation. Perhaps one image that might help us metaphorically relate to this time is that image with which we are familiar of the empty tomb. After the death of Jesus, the disciples visited the empty tomb where they sought comfort and discovered that he was gone. He was no longer there, which began to plant in them the seed of hope that perhaps he was not dead. The emptiness of our church buildings does not mean that we are dead. Just as Jesus visits Bethany, the house of the afflicted, we also hope that our homes, our places of affliction, may also be, as they were in the time of Jesus, communities of healing. As so many of our faith communities have proclaimed, the church is not closed, only the buildings are. We are the church, the living body of Jesus, and we are everywhere. The church is online. Quiet personal time with God is not canceled. Prayer continues. Checking on a friend still happens and occurs. Helping others is not canceled. We have lived with the stark reality of how contagious this virus is. We need also to hold on to the hope that also highly contagious are acts of kindness, patience, love, enthusiasm, faith, and hope that we pray will get us through this time and remind us that God is with us, God is close to us, and we remain not simply a community of the afflicted, but also a community of healing.